Amen. Yeah.
Did you remember me and Lisa, we did 10 years flat 4th of July since Amanda passed away?
Yeah. I think we've said this before. It just doesn't seem possible. 10 years. Doesn't seem possible. Well, grab your Bibles, turn to Deuteronomy 4. So we're going to start a new study exploring the Ten Commandments. But I'm going to warn you, we're not going to get anywhere near the Ten Commandments today, and probably not next week. And I'm also going to warn you that I've got just a lot of information. Take what you can get and leave the rest. That's fine. But I knew I wanted to do some sort of introduction to the Ten Commandments. We are familiar with them, but there's a lot of introductory stuff. And I've not even got to introduce... I'm basically going to introduce the introduction, okay? So we haven't even made it to what I was planning on to be the introduction. But just sort of lay some background stuff. My wife and I, we got married 19 years ago. Next Tuesday is our 19th anniversary. And we went for our honeymoon, which was my job. I tell young couples when they get engaged, the husband, the groom, he needs to plan the honeymoon. And he only needs to participate when invited when it comes to the wedding. I think that's good advice. Because ladies, you want to be in charge of the wedding. You want him to feel involved, but frankly, you couldn't care less what he thinks. And so it's this weird little dance that we grooms have. I'll never forget when we were looking at cake toppers at Lobby Hobby. I mean, I was so excited to be there. And I picked the one of the bride dragging the groom. Seen those? It's hilarious. She did not find that funny. Now, my wife knows I like to joke around, but this is not something, this is our wedding top, cake top, whatever. Fine. But anyways, so I was in charge of the honeymoon, and we found cabins in a small town called Murphy, North Carolina. Some of y'all may remember, I told the story of Murphy. That is where the Olympics bomber was found. From 1996 Atlantic Olympics. And a few years ago, for our 15th anniversary, we went back to our honeymoon spot. And I took Amanda to the Save-A-Lot dumpster where they caught him. She was not wooed, to say the least, okay? And they're like, she goes, it's a dumpster. Not just any dumpster. But anyway, what were we talking about? Anyways, so we went to the honeymoon. We saw on one of the tourist little things that they have a Bible, Bible, not a camp, but like a theme park. We're like, well, that sounds interesting. It was like 10 miles up the road from us, middle of nowhere. And so we went back to it more recently. Here we are at this place. This place brags having the world's largest display of the Ten Commandments. It is massive. Absolutely massive. Tell you what you do. Get on Wilkerson, okay? So you're coming from downtown, you're going to come to East Frankfort, and you're going to go up that hill of Wilkinson. It's a big hill. You should walk it. I've done it a few times. It's a massive hill. It is like half of that, okay? And these steps, you can walk all the way up. You can drive around, which is what boring people do. But you can go. It is the Ten Commandments. This place also has like Golgotha. It has these steps. It's a denomination. I forgot to look it up. It's a certain denomination. And that are prominent in like the East Tennessee, West North Carolina area. They've got like their own little history. They got these, you can read it. And it's cool right around the Reformation, and then they kind of lose me after that. But it's got neat little places. We've been, each time we've gone. But it is absolutely massive. And it's cool. If you're ever in West North Carolina, you ought to go. But to say that the Ten Commandments are a prominent part of America would be kind of obvious. For example, in the U.S. Supreme Court, if you've ever been to D.C., you'll see this on the front. That is your boy Moses. Next to him is Confucius, Eastern sort of teacher dude. And then next to him is a guy named Solon. He was an Athenian lawyer and poet. So we do have poetry there. But these would be three prominent legal figures in history. There's other figures throughout. This sculpture completed in 1934 with the caption, which I think is above it up here somewhere, that says, "Justice, the Guardian of Liberty." And I would add, there is no comma there, and it bothers me. Okay, I just want to throw that out there. So it says, "Justice, the Guardian of Liberty." That's just bad English. At the Library of Congress, here's Moses. If you've ever been there, you'll see Moses. I think the Apostle Paul is there, and there's others. But there's Moses right there as a prominent figure as regards to the law. This scene on Mount Sinai where he brings the Ten Commandments is the picture, really, of Western legal tradition. It really is the beginning of it, even though he's an Eastern, Middle Eastern figure. But his influence on Western law is significant. One more, again, there's others. Here is Moses in the U.S. House of Representatives. We didn't go in the House of Representatives when we went last year, but he is one of 23 lawgivers depicted in marble. I read somewhere where Moses is the only one who's looking out. The rest are actually looking towards Moses. I read it on the internet, so I assume it's true. The plaque reads, Moses, years 1350 to 1250. I don't think those years are accurate for a number of reasons. But nevertheless, it's the U.S. House of Representatives, and they get everything right. So Moses, Hebrew prophet and lawgiver, transformed a wandering people into a nation, received the Ten Commandments. So clearly then that the shaping of our country, especially with 4th of July coming up, has been shaped by Moses. There was a book I read years ago, when we were in Brett County. It traced the influence, not of Jesus in American history, but of Moses. It was an interesting book. That Moses keeps popping up over and over again in our nation's history. But given the prominence of the Ten Commandments, by the way, I didn't put a photo up of this. You only have like a few weeks to see this. You can go to our capital, state capitol, and the Ten Commandments are hanging up. It's a small framed, like 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, if you will. I've met the legislator who made sure that was put there. It's right next to the preamble of the U.S. Constitution and other important documents, the Magna Carta and stuff. But the Ten Commandments are there. Soon, at least it's law now, soon the old Ten Commandments that were up on the state capitol property, I believe it was next to the floral clock, soon those are going to be put back. They got taken down. I don't know the story. But by law, past this last session, it's going to go back. So soon, you'll be able to visit the Ten Commandments on the state capitol property. Now, no one knows when it's going to happen. I keep asking legislators, and the guys that were influential in getting that passed, they have no idea. So do with that information whatever you want. But given the prominence of the Ten Commandments, Brennan, will you help them? The pizza people are here. We need to get them to go around. The youth are having pizza today. Okay. So, surprise, we're all having pizza. Thank you. I found that other groups have their own Ten Commandments. And I thought it'd be fun if we read them. Let's start with atheists. Would you like to read the Ten Commandments of atheism? You don't, but we're going to anyways, okay? I knocked out some of these, so I think I have like 5 or 6 here. Here they are. Do not do to others what you would not want them to do to you. Okay, it's basically do to others as you would have them do to you, but it's inverted because they're atheists and they're weird. If you're atheist, you have to be the opposite. In all things, strive to cause no harm. And remember, this is atheist, and so I would just, if I were an apologist, I would come here and say, we need you to define these terms. What does the word harm mean? Right? From an atheist perspective, can you define a word like that? I would say spreading atheism is harm. But anyways, third, treat your fellow human beings, your fellow living things, and the world in general with love, honesty, faithfulness, and respect. Again, I would ask to define those terms. What does the word love mean in an atheistic worldview? What does faithfulness mean in an atheistic worldview? That's an interesting word. And one of the things you're pointing out is fellow human beings and your fellow living things. Now we've opened up a can of worms under atheism, particularly with the history of atheism. And a lot of interpretation there. Fourth, do not overlook evil or shrink from administrating justice, but always be ready to forgive wrongdoing freely admitted and honestly regretted. A lot of interesting things here. One is, how do you define evil? Right? If you can't define love, can't define evil. How do you define justice if you can't define evil? Particularly when you take out the afterlife. So if there is no ultimate justice in the afterlife, can you honestly say that there is a thing such called justice here? If you cannot define justice here, is it because you cannot define good and evil? It is. Atheism has a lot of problems. And this emphasis on forgiveness. Friedrich Nietzsche, German philosopher who is to blame for a lot of the mess of the 20th century, he thinks forgiveness is weakness. So it's interesting that that's there. Fifth, live life with a sense of joy and wonder. Okay, so how do you define joy? How do you define wonder? It's interesting. The word wonder carries with it a theological baggage. What is wonder? I would add, what is beauty? In the Bible, beauty and majesty and glory are all related. And to wonder, to awe, that's theological language. The only thing you can wonder in atheist worldview is creation itself, but you don't believe in a creator. So you wonder at accidents. And then you wonder, does that mean I'm an accident? Well, now you're not wondering. You're wondering. Anyways, I think this last one, question everything. Oh, let's question everything. What about these other commandments? Should I follow them? You see, it's a mess. Let's do another one. This is from CNN. So you know it's going to be good and accurate. And they ran a competition, what they call the 10 non-commandments. That means nothing. It just looks good on the internet, I guess. Here are some of them. The one that won got like a $10,000 prize. So, man, I wish I had applied and made something up. Be open-minded and be willing to alter your beliefs with new evidence. Well, it sounds like pretty closed-minded, wouldn't you agree? What's the old saying? You can be so open-minded your brain falls out. This is a good example of that. So if you are willing to alter your beliefs, you're no longer open-minded. But then again, if you're not open-minded to altering your beliefs, then you're closed-minded. These terms aren't clearly defined. So if you knock out divine revelation and authority, you're left in a mess. Strive to understand what is most likely to be true and not to believe what you wish to be true. Notice that it is likely to be true because truth itself is unknowable. You're not wondering, or you've lost wonder, you're just left to wonder. This scientific method is the most reliable way to understand the natural world. But I thought we're supposed to be open-minded. Oh, I mean, what's that? Well, I believe crystals are important. I read the stars, don't you? When we were in Virginia last week, my son loves space. Loves it. So Langley, NASA, is right there in Hampton. So we went there, and they have a gift shop, because everywhere you go is gift shops. And in NASA's gift shop, their little museum and stuff, is an astrology section. I was so angry about that. It's just the whole point of NASA is to, anyways. I think there's a few more here. Every person has the right to control their own body, of course. But now we're not being open-minded. Sounds closed-minded, don't you think? What if science tells you otherwise? God is not necessary to be a good person or to live a full and meaningful life. Again, you have to define what does a meaningful life mean. What does the word good mean? If you can't define good, how do you define a good person? Lewis comes to faith for several reasons. One of them is because the moral argument for existence of God, that good is a meaningless word without God. How can you know what is right without one who is righteous? How do you know what is law without a lawgiver? We have the responsibility to consider others, including future generations. Okay, I mean, I don't disagree with that, but again, why? Why is that? If you don't need God for that, why should I care about the future? And finally, there is no one right way to live, including caring about future generations. So you undermine the previous 9 commandments, because I think that's the last one. I took several out. So you can see that this is a common trope that people have, because the 10 Commandments are so popular, but we can't quite get to the beauty of what Moses presents here. Now, I want to throw this out here, that the 10 Commandments as we have them is not unique in the ancient world. In fact, we have similar moral codes predating Moses on the top of Mount Sinai. The most prominent one I want to share with you, and this over your head, just ignore it, and I don't know, count sheep in your head or something. Go to sleep with John in the back. But this beauty right here is called the Code of Hammurabi. So if you go to the Bible Museum in Washington, D.C., they will have a replica of this. Hammurabi was a early Babylonian king, and the Code of Hammurabi is basically their legal system. It governs their civic law. If you do this, this is what happens. And this is a treasure trove for a lot of reasons. It predates Moses and the giving of the Ten Commandments. And there's debate as to when Moses and the Exodus happened, but either primary dates. This predates it. It's Babylonian, which is significant because Babylon plays such an important role in the Bible, including the book of Genesis. I want to point this out. This is me. It's probably nonsense, but I do want to point it out. So the law area is all around here, and you'll notice at the top, that's Hammurabi and the god of like justice and the sun up there. This is in the shape of a tower. And it is a Babylonian tower. It's a law book. Just something worth pointing out. So you ascend the tower, and there you meet the gods. So like Eden was on a mountain. Moses ascends a mountain. There he meets God for the Ten Commandments. The Tower of Babel, the purpose was to ascend into the heavens. This reflects ancient cosmology. So mountains were the place where the gods and humans can meet in the middle. So Jacob climbs his ladder, is probably more of a stairway, is the Hebrew word. That imagery is all over the Bible. Jerusalem is the top of a hill. You go up to Jerusalem. We get this in the Code of Hammurabi. One of the things interesting is there's like 280 plus laws on there, is that there's a lot of parallels between the Code of Hammurabi and the Mosaic Law. Let me give you just two examples. Leviticus 20, if a man commits adultery with the wife of his neighbor, both the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death. Code of Hammurabi says, if a man's wife be surprised with another man, both shall be tied and thrown into the water, but the husband may pardon his wife and the king his slaves. In other words, is that this is the punishment for that crime. And they're very similar in that regard. Then just one more example. Whoever steals a man and sells him, and anyone found in possession of him shall be put to death. Speaking of slavery, those who say that the Bible promotes slavery, what do you do with this? Now remember why the Mosaic Law condemns the buying and purchasing and selling of slaves is because the Hebrew people were slaves in Egypt. And you'll get something similar. If anyone steals the minor son of another, he shall be put to death. Slavery is ubiquitous in history. And it's really the modern West that gets rid of it. There are more slaves right now in the world than at any point in history. It is a major problem globally. But because of such similarities, a lot of people think that what you're getting in the Ten Commandments and the Mosaic Law is really copy and paste. Now, the fact that there's similarities shouldn't be surprising. The Code of Hammurabi, the Mosaic Law, and the Egyptian legal system, they're all right there in the middle, and Moses is well aware of all of it. So it shouldn't be surprising to find that the Mosaic Law reflects the culture that it's in. Think about it. If we read the Mosaic Law, and then we found all these other civil systems, and they didn't look familiar, you know what we would hear from scholars? Well, clearly someone made this up centuries later. So it's sort of like we're going to complain about what we have in the Bible no matter what we find. So its similarity means it's inauthentic. But if it wasn't similar, then it's not authentic. Well, you got to pick one, okay? And so it shouldn't surprise us that Moses raised a prince in Egypt, influenced under the Egyptian system, would have been familiar with the Babylonian system and the Canaanite system, that what you get in the Bible, yes, given to us by God, still reflects the human author. And so we're not surprised by this. However, there is one other reason why the Code of Hammurabi is so important, and that is it predates the Mosaic Law. For a long, long time, critics of the Bible said, there's no way Moses could have written the first 5 books of the Bible. There is no evidence of a complex legal system in the ancient world until we found this. And it's as complex, if not more complex, than what we have with Moses. So if you can get that in Babylon, surely a prince of Egypt can develop his own system. So the Code of Hammurabi is important. I want to share another ancient moral code, civic code. It's called the Maxims of Delphi. It's a set of moral precepts inscribed at the Temple of Apollo in ancient Greek city of Delphi. It's 147 pithy maxims. dates to at least the 3rd century BC. So this predates Jesus. This would be like the intertestamental period, the end of the Old Testament sort of era. And they're just pithy maxims. They're not laws, but more like proverbs. Here's a few of them that I liked. Know yourself. Okay. I don't know what to do with that, but you should know yourself. Nothing in excess. Give a pledge and trouble is at hand. Help your friends. Subdue pleasure. Pursue glory. Speak auspiciously. You Owen Countyans need to look that up. Rule your wife. Rule your wife. I'm just reading the notes I found, right? That's one of the maxims of Delphi. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just reporting. Fear what controls you. And finally, die for your country. Not for your wife, clearly, but you should die for your country. So the point is that what we have in the Ten Commandments isn't unique. We could look at others. The oldest one we found is called the Code of Ur-Nammu, which is the area where Abraham is from. It dates to 2050 BC. It's the oldest law code that we have found in history. The point is that what we read in the Ten Commandments is sort of a summary of the Mosaic Law. It's consistent with what we would expect. But the Ten Commandments are particularly unique in how they function now, how they're read and interpreted now, and their influence, of course, we've seen. So with all of that said, what should we think about the Ten Commandments? Now, Lord willing, next week, we'll look at Exodus 19 when they come to the foot of Mount Sinai right before the giving of the Ten Commandments. Then we'll go look at all 10 of them. A couple of things I just want to point out here as we approach Mount Sinai. The first is the Ten Commandments are not a Christian rule book. I would say that those who take holiness seriously, this is a good place to start. Don't kill people. That's a good place to start. Be faithful to your marriage vows. That's a good place to start. Remember the Sabbath. You've heard me joke that I grew up, we were not allowed to mow the yard on a Sunday. And the one time we were in so much trouble from Mom and Dad, they were making us mow the yard on Sunday, and the lawnmower broke down. To this day, I've never mowed the yard on Sunday, and I shame people. I keep it to myself, so I'm still righteous. But I shame people who do, like a good Pharisee that I are. It's a good place to start, remember the Sabbath, all that, yes. But it's not a checklist for the holy, okay? If you need to start somewhere, here you go. It's a start. But it's not a checklist. In fact, Jesus condemns that sort of approach to the Ten Commandments. I'll give you 2 examples. We could look at really a dozen in the 4 Gospels. Jesus says regarding murder, you have heard that it was said, those of old, you shall not murder. It's taken straight from the Ten Commandments. And whoever murders is liable to judgment. Yeah, that's Mosaic law. You murder, you're going to get punished. Code of Hammurabi got that one right. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. Whoever says you fool will be liable to the hell of fire. Now, we don't have time to exegete this. We've done it in the past. You'll notice how it increases. So judgment, the council, then hell, right? It just, the punishment gets higher and higher. But you'll notice what Jesus does here is he's looking at the Pharisees and says, you guys have approached the Ten Commandments as a checklist. And what you said is, before you go to bed at night, you say, did I murder anyone? Nope. Look who's still righteous. And Jesus says, yeah, but you hate the Samaritans, don't you? You hate those Gentiles, don't you? Yeah, you're deserving hell. Or we can look at something like adultery. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery, taken straight from the Ten Commandments. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Right? And every time you bring this up with middle school boys, they all start sweating. Right? Because we all approach this as, you go to bed at night, and if you're a middle school boy, and of course I'm picking on them, but you think, I didn't commit adultery because I'm not married. Dodge that bullet. And you think, I must be a holy person. And yet there you are on your phone, searching websites, doom scrolling, and everything else. And Jesus says you are equally guilty of violating the moral code of God. So we have to be careful in treating this as a divine rule book. Jesus all the time does this with Pharisees. He'll say that you are so caught up on rule keeping that you tithe your spice rack. You're a weirdo. All the while you've neglected justice and goodness and mercy. So we have to be careful in not allowing it to feed legalism in our heart. The Decalogue, which means 10 words, it's the Greek term for it. The Decalogue is a good starting point, but it fails for the most part in addressing the hearts. In fact, if you want to see this, it's not from my notes. Actually, you're in Deuteronomy. Turn to Deuteronomy 5. So Deuteronomy 5 is the other giving of the Ten Commandments. So it's true that the Ten Commandments don't address the heart, but that's not entirely true. Sort of like the joke I was making about lying to my wife. You'll notice that when we think of the laws, we think of proper worship, don't make graven images. That is Deuteronomy 5 verse 8. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or likeness to anything that is in heaven above. Don't take the Lord's name in vain, right? So it affects your tongue. There's the bearing false witness, murder, stealing, all that. There is one law that deals directly with the heart. It's Deuteronomy 5, verse 21. You shall not covet. Now, covet is a sin of the heart. In fact, and we'll probably come back to this, you could take the Ten Commandments, and most people agree it's broken down into two sections. First 4 deal with how to love God. The last 6 deal with how to love your neighbor. But actually, all you need is either 1 or 10. So 1 is worship only the Lord your God. If you worship God, you'll keep the other ones. You're not going to kill people because we're made in the image of God. You're not going to steal from people because we're made in the image of God. Your neighbor is. You're going to reflect and worship the Lord on the Sabbath. You're going to keep all of them. At the same time, if you keep the 10th commandment, you shall not covet, you'll keep all the ones that precede it. Why do you steal? It begins with covetousness. Why do you kill? Why don't you keep the Sabbath? Why do you use the Lord's name in vain? It's the heart issue. This is why Jesus would say it is out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. And this is where the Ten Commandments, as a general rule, actually fail us, is it's good at condemning, it cannot regenerate. And one of the reasons is because, especially when we usually read it, we read it only as it modifies the outside, and we don't think of the Ten Commandments as modifying the inside. Now, as we've seen, it does address that, but we don't read it that way. So we have to be careful about using it as a rule book. In fact, when we do use it as a rule book, we run the risk of turning the gospel into a legal code rather than a message, a story about grace. To put it another way, the gospel becomes about do rather than done. The gospel is that Christ has satisfied all things. He has cleansed us of all sin, and He's risen from the dead, and thus declaring us righteous and regenerating us from the inside out. But when we turn to legalism, what we're saying is it's not what Christ has done, it's about what I do. And that's going to feed pride and everything else. So we want to avoid that. If we want to be righteous, we first must be regenerated. And that's the work of the Holy Spirit. Here's the second thing, is the purpose of the Ten Commandments is not restraint, but blessing. It's another thing that we miss. When we turn into a rule book, we're going to view it through the lens of restraint. Don't do this, don't do that. When actually its purpose is to be blessing. One of the things that we do in our English Bibles, and it's perfectly fine to do this, but the first 5 books of the Bible is called the Torah, T-O-R-A-H. And we translate Torah as law. That's a perfectly fine translation. It's an oversimplification of the word. Torah means more than law. It really means instruction. Now, it's instruction towards the law, but it means more than that. Law implies restriction and punishment. And the Mosaic Law has that. If you kill, you're going to be executed. Right? And if it's, what we would call manslaughter, you have cities of refuge you can flee from, and you'll have a trial. Our legal system is really shaped by the Mosaic system in many ways. Multiple witnesses and everything else. But what this does, when we only view this through the lens of law, is we restrict the Bible to moral codes. Good, bad. Righteous, unrighteous. Clean and unclean. Holy, unholy. And although there's a lot of that in the Bible, we have to be careful in limiting the Bible to that. Torah is not just law, it's instruction. Because the Bible does do right and wrong. It also does wisdom and folly. We talked about this at the Capitol today. Wisdom and folly is a big part of the Bible. You could be wise and still, or you could be morally righteous and still a fool. I think this is what I use at the Capitol today, that you probably have someone in your life, a child or someone like that, a coworker, good guy, give you the shirt off his back. Don't let him operate heavy machinery. You know what I'm talking about? Like nice guy, loves people, would love to have him over 4th of July barbecue. Just, a bit of a fool, okay? There is a distinction between the wise and folly and right and wrong. Torah gives us both wisdom and morality. It's like being guided by an expert guide. And this guide leads us towards blessing, what the Hebrews called shalom, peace, the idea of a return to Eden. So in that context, Torah, the law, instruction, leads to freedom. I think this is important for us to see. Now, think about the context of the Ten Commandments. I know we're in Deuteronomy, but in Exodus 20, it's a climax. So you've had the 10 plagues, you've got the crossing the Red Sea. Between the Red Sea and Sinai is a series of events, and they're not good. It's basically the Baptists of Israel complaining. And I'm assuming all the complainers are Baptists. Okay, they'll say things like, "We're thirsty. You brought us out here to die." They get water. "We're hungry. You brought us out here to die." "We're unarmed and we see the Amalekites, the giants. We're all going to die." And what we find then is that though the slaves were set free from Egypt, they were still slaves in the wilderness. Their master wasn't Pharaoh, it was the world of flesh and the devil. They were still slaves, moral, spiritual slaves, driven by their passions and their appetites and their desires. And so that leads them to bitterness. It leads them to idolatry, eventually with the golden calf. It leads them to fear. We're all going to die. It leads them to anger. Why did you bring us out here? Did you bring us out here to die? It leads them to resentment. We wish we would go back and live under those masters. At least we had enough bread to eat. And so we have these series that there's something wrong in the heart of the Israelites. And then they come to Mount Sinai, by which they are given the 10 Commandments, and with it the rest of the laws of Moses. And so what you see then is this isn't Moses saying to a people enslaved to sin, he's not saying, "Here, now I'm going to remind you that you're sinners." It's rather saying, here is good instruction that the wise are careful to follow, and in following it, you find blessing and freedom. That's the point. Is that a society that doesn't put up with murder is a society that isn't overrun with violence. That's the way of the wise. Doesn't that sound more freeing than everyone does what is right in their own eyes? I mean, we went through Judges a few months ago. Did that seem very freeing to you? That everyone did just whatever they wanted to? So the purpose is not restriction, though it does restrict, but ultimately blessing. If no one's stealing from one another, don't you miss the days of going to bed with your doors unlocked, not worried about anything? Was that more freeing to now you're worried about every new neighbor that you get? Which one's more of a blessing? Which one's more restrictive? My dad was a free-range child. You were probably a free-range child. Basically, the moms called each other and said, where are the boys at? Oh, they're over at the Smith's house. All right. And my dad knew that when the street lights came on, he went home. Other than that, my grandmother had no idea where he was until they started calling, and all the boys were there. And this free range. We're watching a show with the kids, and it takes in the 80s. And the kids can't believe that the kids in the show are just roaming. They're on their bikes. It's the 80s. And I keep telling them, like, and the parents have no idea where they are. They're just roaming around town, talking to strangers. This is why we don't have trick or treat anymore. We have trunk or treat now, because we have to create safe environments for kids to get candy. Wasn't that a more blessed society? Keep the 10 Commandments. It's that easy. It's blessing. One last thing. I think it's the last thing. Yeah. And that is the ultimate purpose of the 10 Commandments and the Mosaic Law in general is to get us to Jesus. C.S. Lewis is right when he says, no man knows how bad he is until he's tried really hard to be good. There's a former NBA player. He was labeled on social media as the worst NBA player of all time. He played for 10 years in the league. Played for the Lakers. And he never played. He sat on the bench. But he was on the roster of an NBA team for about a decade. But it went around on social media that he wasn't any good. And that there were a lot of better players who should have taken his roster spot, but for some reason he just stayed in the NBA. So what he's done, now that he's retired, is he has an open invitation to anyone to play one-on-one against him. So now that he's retired, so he's in his mid-30s, he's letting anyone come and play him in his own private gym. You know what he's found out? He's better than everybody. Right? He would say, was I the worst NBA player? Probably. But I was an NBA level player. Right? You forget that part. It's amazing how bad everyone is until they try to prove that they're better than an NBA player. The same is true when it comes to righteousness. Lewis is right that you don't realize how bad you are until you try to be good. Have you ever met someone who's honestly trying to quit cussing? It sounds easy on paper, doesn't it? No? It's hard. It's hard to be good. So it is true that the purpose of the 10 Commandments is not restraint but blessing. But there is another purpose here. The purpose of the 10 Commandments is not to liberate, but to condemn. Both are true. Now, it liberates in the sense that it's Torah. It condemns in the sense that it is law. So, if I bet where you work or here in our city or something, there is a regulation, a law, an ordinance, or a rule. It only exists because of some fool didn't realize that you shouldn't do something. That exists. And why is that? Every law exists because someone was doing that and they needed to be stopped. Should we have a law banning murder? No. We should all know you shouldn't do that. But it's a problem. I don't know if you've noticed this. It's a problem. What the law does, it does not liberate you, it condemns you. It puts in front of you, this is who you are. You're a thief. You're prone to forgetting the Lord your God. You're prone to worshiping other gods. You're prone to covetousness. You're prone to this. I mean, think about it. You've heard me say before, if we put a red button over here, the sign says, do not push this red button. We're all going to push it. We're all going to think about pushing it. We're all going to wish that we pushed it. We're all going to wait till everyone's out of the sanctuary so we can push the button and see what happens. And the reason there will be a sign that says do not push is because someone has tried to push the button. So the law condemns us. It condemns us as sinners. And because it condemns, it cannot regenerate. It cannot save us. The only thing it can do is say, you're a sinner. You're immoral. You're unclean. You're dirty. You're filthy. You're outside the camp. You're away from God. That's the only thing the law can do. Which means if we want to be set free, what we don't need is a law book. What we need is a Redeemer who has fulfilled the law. And we have that in Jesus. We quoted Matthew 5 earlier. Jesus says, I didn't come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it in the Sermon on the Mount. And that's true. Jesus keeps the law perfectly, does what we cannot, so that when he serves as our substitute. Remember, the law tells us how to be cleansed because sin makes us dirty. It brings shame and guilt. How can we be set free from guilt? How we can be cleansed from our shame? And so there's a complicated series of sacrifices and rituals. Jesus comes as the true and better Lamb of God, and he is both the priest who offers the lamb. He is the lamb offered by the high priest. He dies in our place for our sins, and he's resurrected the third day. What's interesting is that the New Testament plays with this imagery at Mount Sinai, and they're given the Ten Commandments. I'm going to give you just one example. It actually kind of ruins what we'll do next week, but why not go ahead and share it? Hebrews 12. For you have not come to a mountain that can be touched, and to a blazing fire, to darkness and gloom and whirlwind. This is Mount Sinai. We'll see it again next week in Exodus 19. The mountain was holy because God is dwelling there. They can't touch the mountain. They're afraid of the mountain. And you see, you get this language of the blazing fire and the whirlwind. Remember, the fire leads them at night and all that. And to the blast of a trumpet, the sound of words, which sounds was such that those who heard begged that no further word be spoken to them. Deuteronomy is it 9 or something like that, where Moses says, has anyone heard the voice of God and survived? We have. Actually, maybe here in Deuteronomy 4. But the writer of Hebrews goes on. For they, that generation at Mount Sinai that got the Ten Commandments, for they could not bear the command. If even a beast touches the mountain, it will be stoned. That's holy ground. Can't have anything unholy approach without, it being cleansed. And so terrible was the sight that Moses said, I am full of fear and trembling. You remember that Moses actually is the one that has to go into the presence of God. It's a very Mount Transfiguration imagery. We did that, I think, last year in great detail, so I won't review that. But you, the writer of Hebrews says, you have come to Mount Sinai. Notice he's saying there's two mountains. There's Mount Sinai, there's Mount Zion. Mount Sinai, you come with fear and trembling. Even Moses didn't want to ascend the mountain. Don't even let your stray dog run up there. It's dangerous. It's the earthquakes, the whirlwinds, the blazing fire. All you get there is judgment and holiness and condemnation. That's where the law comes from. But you, in Christ, which has been the argument of Hebrews, you've come to a different mountain, Mount Sinai, or Mount Zion, and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to myriads of angels. Oh, I like that, don't you? That's the mountain I want to come to. I like that. To the general assembly and church of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven. Ain't that a beautiful image there? And to God, the judge of all. Now before we couldn't come to God. He was still the judge of all. He's a consuming fire, we read in the Mosaic Law.